All right, it's 4 o'clock. I will call this meeting of the Economic Improvement Corporation of the City of Kerrville to order. If I could ask Sherry Patillo, if you would, to lead us in an invocation.
Yes, let's pray. Father God, you are so good and so gracious to us, and we thank you for your presence in our lives. We also thank you for the opportunity to come together today to discuss business and to seek the peace and the prosperity of our city. God, we ask for your hand to guide our deliberations today, those things that we discuss, those decisions that are being made, that they would all be pleasing unto you. And again, we give this time to you, and we thank you for your love in our lives. In Christ Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I'm looking on our agenda for the minutes from our previous meeting. We don't have any. Okay, moving on then. Item number 1 is a visitors and citizens forum. Any citizen with business not scheduled on the agenda may speak to the Economic Improvement Corporation. No deliberation or action can be taken on these items because the Open Meetings Act requires an item be posted on an agenda 72 hours before the meeting. Visitors are asked to limit their presentation to 3 minutes. Do I have any visitors that would like to take the podium and speak to the Economic Improvement Corporation? All right, I see none. We'll move on to item number 2, which are the monthly financials for March 2018. EA, is that you today?
Today it's me.
Very good.
As we briefed you guys on last time, Sandra Yarbrough retired, and Ms. Dozier is getting her CE credits to maintain her CPA designation. So she's out this week, but she will be joining us again in May. So I will briefly just go through here. Sales tax revenue for the EIC was $242,127 for March 2018. That's a slight reduction. We saw, as I think Amy explained last time, 2017, there was a little bit of a bump. We're thinking, as we're tracking through right now, a lot of that was related to hail damage and various capacities of how that revenue kind of bumped up because of that hail damage via vehicle repairs that occurred, roof materials that were bought for re-roofing, and a whole host of things. So it's kind of a little bit of a leveling out from where that bump was from last year. So overall, right now, potentially forecasting about a $75,000 shortfall from the original EIC budget for the year. As you recall, there were no expenditures for last month, and the really no projects that had funding activity for last month either. Just the normal pieces. There was a question about the tax pool rate. Amy tracked that down. It's 1.9216. So that's the current vast majority of the investment, and we are limited, as you recall, by the state of Texas on what we can. It's pretty low risk, high liquidity type activity, but that tax pool rate has been pretty advantageous for us, both from a rate and efficiency standpoint. Be happy to answer any other financial questions that I can for you.
So the reports that are submitted here start on page 6 and end on page 8. So that's what he's referring to. If you do have questions about those reports, now's your opportunity to ask.
Or you can wait till May for Amy.
All right. Doesn't look like we have any reports. Let's move on to item 2B, which is a projects update. Is that you again, EA?
It's me.
All right.
You're going to be seeing a lot of me today. Reuse distribution mains, those 32,000 linear feet are basically installed. The remaining portion is basically the connection over the Guadalupe River, right there just downriver from 534. That is slated to be installed in May, and that will essentially conclude that project. Not related to the EIC portion, but just general update. We are completing, just about done with the soil cement installation at the actual reuse pond. So we are anticipating having that complete hopefully this week and actually start being able to fill it up. So we won't be able to send it for a little while longer, but it's going to take some time to start putting water in it. So we're very encouraged that that's going to occur very soon.
Remind me of the location of that pond.
That is at Spur 100 on the city farm property,
Okay.
next to the landfill.
What is the guesstimate on when it's gonna spill, deliver water out?
Our hope is June 1. We're still continuing to shoot for June 1.
For delivery of water?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Regarding River Trail West, preliminary construction has begun. Most of that's cleared. If you saw the article in the newspaper today, we're beginning to pour concrete. We did a little bit of testing with that last week, but they're hoping to really start blowing and going here soon, putting concrete down in the form. So very encouraged by that. We're on track right now to continue to be complete by that kind of August, September timeframe. Tennis Center improvements, hopefully you guys got the email invite. We will be having a public open house tomorrow at 4 o'clock on site. So please do join us. We did post EIC to be able to go. Obviously, you're not taking any vote or anything like that, but that way you guys could participate in receiving that information from the consultant and ask any questions, see the current plan that's out there. That's your project update, unless you have any questions.
And that meeting is located where again?
It's going to be at the Tennis Center.
At the tennis center.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
Any refreshments being served?
Do you have any requests? Not at this time, no, but we'll see, I guess, what the temperature is. We don't want anybody passing out there.
All right. Thank you, EA.
Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
EA.
All right, item number 3A is a public hearing for economic development grant agreement between Thompson Drive Partners LLC, the City of Kerrville, Texas Economic Improvement Corporation, and the City of Kerrville, Texas, in an amount not to exceed $850,000 for public infrastructure extension along Thompson Road related to a private development. So I will open this public hearing. It is 4:07.
Would you
EA?
like staff presentation? Yes,
Sure.
sir. So I put together just a brief presentation for you, and EIC, you've seen some of this information before, so I don't want to be repetitive, but certainly want to get some of this information back out to the public. Some of it was presented back in the August timeframe, but there's been some time that's progressed since then, obviously. Just a brief project summary. Essentially, the private portion of the project is a 60-acre mixed-use phase development. I'll show you a map just here in a second, but it's along Thompson Drive as you're headed west towards the Spur 98 bridge. It's currently located just outside of the city limits along Thompson Road. The infrastructure portion of the project, which is really what the request is being made for, is about $1.85 million in infrastructure investment. That includes sewer force mains and gravity mains, a lift station that can complete about 110,000 gallons per day, just to give you a kind of a size estimate, and then water main. So obviously all the other accoutrements to that, electrical and whatnot. That's kind of the gist of the project. This was identified in the city's 2012 wastewater master plan. It was not taken on by the city because it did represent a fairly significant cost. It just wasn't. Wasn't taken. So this represents a partnership opportunity for the city to accomplish this work and really open up that corridor of about 300 or so acres along Thompson Road. The financial assistance request is for $850,000 to go towards that $1.85 million infrastructure investment. Just to kind of show you from this mouse, there we go. Show you kind of where this is located. Essentially, it's the red line denoted in this outline here. This, where my cursor is right now, is where the existing city limit line is, and then goes towards the river this direction. So it would kind of fill in that corner. This right now, this is kind of just for geographical, this is the state hospital property down here. This is the water treatment facility. This is kind of down here in the corner. This is Francisco Lemos. The blue and green are the city's current water and wastewater infrastructure. As you can see, these blue lines are coming out of the water treatment plant and headed south-southeast. You can see the wastewater infrastructure is way down here at Francisco Lemos. So basically this entire corridor on this side of the river in Nimitz, it does not have wastewater service currently. And that's really the vast portion of the infrastructure that to be installed. You can see here, again, property is denoted in the red outline, 60 acres. This is James Road, Knapp Road, kind of go across here. This property is in the city limits. It's currently zoned at W7.
Before we leave the maps, go back to that one at least. Can you tell me when you're referencing 300 acres that this would open up? Can you kind of circle where we're talking about?
Sure.
That's opening up.
Yeah, it's a rough approximation.
Right.
But, again, this area up here would be able to gravity sewer into the lift station, which would be located approximately in this area. I included a portion along the roadway. I didn't go very far up into the hill, except for this corridor, which is already into the city limits. And then as well, most of this area along the city limits, a little bit of frontage on this other side. I didn't go very far because there's various challenges there as well. But I would say the 300 acre is a conservative estimate of the area. And that's not to say that additional infrastructure wouldn't necessarily have to be installed, particularly on-site infrastructure within their own properties. But having the lift station and quite a bit of force main and gravity main makes it a significantly easier hurdle.
Okay.
What's W7 zoning? I don't know that.
I could get Drew up here to give you some details, but it's essentially a mixed-use zoning. It's got both commercial as well as residential components to it.
Thank you.
You'll see that in the existing comp plan, this would be indicated in the Strategic Catalyst Area 3. So we've already received some feedback from the community about the likelihood of development within this corridor and some potential uses that they would like to see within that area. So it is, I would say that the project is in line with the current thinking within the comprehensive plan. Of course, that's not adopted yet, but thus far. This is just a zoom in. Again, this is James Road, Knapp Road. You can see a little jaunt here in the city limit area. This blue area is the floodplain. So again, just a short recap on EIC discussion history. This was submitted back in the August time frame. Throughout the fall and early winter time frame, we were coming back and forth with the EIC, negotiating the various deal points that you guys were looking for. As we came into the March dates, we reran some financial analysis based off of the property moving from 30 acres to an acquisition of actually 60 acres owned by the developer, which changed some of the dynamics. And so we reran some of the analyses and brought that back to you guys, and then worked on the final points of the deal points. You guys asked us at the last meeting to go ahead and finalize a draft development agreement and set a public hearing date, and that brings us to tonight. Funding agreement summary. Essentially, the developer will engineer and install that $1.85 million in water and wastewater infrastructure, and then deed it over to the city to run. There will be an annexation and zoning of the entire 60 acres into the city limits. There will be a provision for river trail easements and park dedication, as well as working through a potential trailhead and shared parking on that property. Traffic impact analysis to be conducted. The city will provide City EIC will provide $850,000 to the developer in 3 equal installments upon performance. And those, essentially those installments, phase 1 of performance is at the completion of annexation and zoning, and the city has received a petition for annexation already, so we're working through that. The second phase of funding is at the completion of the infrastructure installation, as well as the commencement on the actual development of phase 1, which will predominantly be, first phase 1 is 120 units of Class A multifamily workforce housing. Phase 3 is at the completion of the entirety of that phase 1 development and the actual certificate of occupancy being issued. So it's truly a complete project ready for folks to move into. There are clawbacks that are completed within the agreement. Essentially, they are initiated if no development occurs within the first 2 years. If that construction isn't initiated or completed within 5 years, then the first 2 phases of those funding pieces come back to the city. And obviously, the infrastructure would have been completed at that point, so that would also come back to the city. There is a provided phased reservation of the utility capacity. Year 1 through 5, the developer is guaranteed 80% of that overall capacity of the 110,000 gallons per day. But right off the bat, the city has 20%. So again, it does open up that 300 acres roughly of area within the corridor. So if there are other developments within that corridor that come in, there is some capacity that the city will have to be able to allocate that towards other development. Year 6 through 10, the capacity levels change. If, for instance, there wasn't further development on the property utilizing that reservation of capacity, that developer piece would drop down to only a guarantee of 40%, and the city would be able to allocate 60% elsewhere offside of that 60 acres if desired and if something came along. And then year 10, if nothing still had happened, that full reservation of capacity is fully turned over to the city, essentially to be able to utilize in any way that the city sees fit. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
I got one for you.
Yes, sir.
So your intent to put the water and wastewater in prior to any work possibly being started on the project?
Yes, sir. There may be some site development work that occurs on site, but for the most part, the infrastructure installation will be the first part of the project. Yes, sir.
Is the wastewater coming down on the north side or the south side when it comes to Thompson?
It is on the north side of Thompson.
So you'll be boring under?
There will be some bores in some areas, particularly the area from the state hospital to Francisco Limas. There's some pretty significant peaking of the topography right there as it transitions from where the first main will have to come over and the gravity main is right there. So there's a pretty significant bore there. And that's been one of the main impediments in regards to the cost, just because it is such a big bore that's going to be required in that area.
So basically, I don't know what the development is on the other side, or if there is any. So will that catch both sides, basically?
It can, absolutely, from a gravity standpoint, on the back side of that peak. Obviously there could be borings that could be required of those, or there could be gravity essentially going down to the lift station on that south side of the property by that development.
Any other questions? All right, this is a public hearing, so we now shall hear from the public. Thank you, EA.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, EA.
I don't have anyone that has given me a slip of paper, but I will open it up. Looks like no one from the public wishes to speak. So I'm gonna declare the public hearing closed. It is 4:18. And discussion among us, if there are any. Any other questions for EA? None. All right. Then I would entertain a motion to approve the Economic Development Grant Agreement between the Thompson Drive Partners, LLC, the City of Kerrville, Texas Economic Improvement Corporation, and the City of Kerrville, Texas, a copy of which is in your packet, pages 14 through 30.
I thought we were going to go into executive session and discuss this.
We certainly can.
I would like to do that if possible.
Okay.
Can we make a motion that because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 2 more items are going to possibly go in, is that correct? So I would make a motion that we defer the executive session discussion to the end of this public part of the meeting, if that makes sense.
I'd second that. Have a motion and a second to defer this for executive session.
Are you recommending deferring just this item for executive session?
I'm suggesting that yes, as we get to the next items, they can, catch themselves up, and we just go into executive session one time. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
You're right.
Instead of having
So I'm saying for right now,
multiple
I'm moving that we take this into executive session under, what's the number I'm supposed to refer to? 071. Okay, 071 and 087 later in the meeting when we get to executive session items. Does that make sense? All right.
We have a motion and a second. Time for a vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. We will move that to executive session at a later time. Item number 4A is the appointment of Amy Dozier as our corporation's treasurer. As you know, currently that is being performed at the city staff level, and Sandra Yarborough was our appointed person, and so she has retired, and Amy is doing that work. So I would entertain a motion to appoint Amy as the corporation's
motion.
treasurer.
A
You have a motion?
second.
And a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand, and that motion passes. All right, moving on to item number 4B, which is a funding application from the City of Kerrville for $2 million in financial assistance for public infrastructure from the Kerrville Economic Improvement Corporation for enhanced capacity to the Kerrville Legion wastewater lift station for economic development purposes. EA, are you going to make that presentation?
Yes, sir, I can. So essentially, the city, as you may recall, we had some conversation about this in the summer timeframe when we were going through some of the budget conversations. Some of the thinking has evolved on that, and certainly we've gotten additional engineering that's occurred, over the last 6 to 9 months. We're honing in on a total project cost that we think is going to be around $9.85 million. The city is making application to the Texas Water Development Board for a portion of that funding. Within the pro forma for that, though, we have built into that some contribution from the EIC to help defer some of those costs because of the significant development purposes of the Legion lift station. Essentially, the lift station is not being just replaced or maintained, but is being upsized significantly. There's about a 50% increase in the capacity of the Legion lift station. There have been a number of projects that were listed in your agenda, Bill, that were either hampered, delayed, or modified because we have essentially run out of capacity at the Legion lift station. And so that is typically, there is a significant portion of economic development per se that has occurred via the water sewer fund over a number of years, via whether that's extensions of water service or enhancements to wastewater capacity. For instance, the Burkdale lift station, which was recently done, or the Jefferson lift station, which was recently done. But that well is quickly running dry, and so no pun intended. We're asking for a little bit of assistance there, so that way we can continue to produce economic development in the future in a very significant corridor of the community. It really stretches all along the downtown area, down 27, down 534, and you've got several other smaller lift station basins that actually pump into the Legion station. For instance, the airport lift station, as well as across the river at the Comanche lift station. So there's a significant corridor of the community that really will be hampered for future growth and economic development if the city is not able to move forward in enhancing this infrastructure. So we would kindly ask the EIC to look and evaluate at directing us to develop a funding agreement. The way we have structured this, as you recall in the budget conversations, we were originally looking at potentially having the EIC assist with debt financing over around a 20-year time span. We had budgeted actually for $200,000 to be possibly initially used as a half payment for this year, and then around $400,000 for the ongoing years, which was going to represent about $5 million worth of that project at that time. Because of the new engineering and the Texas Water Development Board funding and further evaluating the project overall with the finance team, we're now asking for $2 million, but that to essentially be cash contribution over the span of 2 years, and not any impact to this fiscal year, but really similar to the way that the EIC has funded the tennis project, for instance, in 2 installments of $750,000. This would be 2 cash installments of $1 million over the next 2 fiscal years. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
EA, can you help me understand how you all came to restructure this and look at it differently, as well as the amount of grant funding that you're going after? Because I didn't hear an amount. Maybe you said that. But anyway, just sort of how it's moved from what we discussed last August to to the place we are today?
Yes. So essentially, at that time, we were not looking at a Texas Water Development Board funding. The city has not currently done those in the past or in the recent past. What that does is it's still a certificate of obligation that is issued, but it is a certificate of obligation that's owned by the state. And so we are doing financing through the state funding mechanism, and that helps lower the interest rates overall. So the interest rates are better than what the city can get on the open CO market, essentially. So we've chosen to go that route. They ask for an overall amount for the initial part of the funding application. That's why we went ahead and applied for the full 9.85, recognizing that that would probably, hopefully, be shrunk down given the potential cash contribution from the EIC if applicable.
So you're asking for the full amount from them, is what you're saying?
We went ahead and applied for the
Right.
full amount.
Yeah.
I will tell you, from our own internal financing standpoint, we have other projects that are going to require other cash contributions from the Water Sewer Fund, be that for TTHMs, and that fix, be a number of other major capital projects, clarifier update, the wastewater treatment plant oxidation ditch. There's a number of other multi-million-dollar projects that are going to be taking some of that potential capacity. So we have a number of large projects that are going to be required. This is the one that is applicable for EIC because of that expansion of the capacity that's specifically for economic development purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, do we have a backup plan if the state only comes up with 6 or 7 million? What would we do then?
We may have to look at a reprioritization of projects.
Is this going to be big enough for 20, 30 years down the line so we don't have to come back and do it again?
That's certainly the hope. I mean, you just never know what kind of development comes in. But given our current pace of growth, we think that this is going to extend well into the future. Yes, sir.
Better make it bigger than smaller.
Yes, sir. Yes, that is the direction we gave to the engineers as well. Aim for the biggest that we can accommodate, and it is able to be upsized potentially in the future as well. So they are digging the wet well essentially as deep as they can. There are some limitations there from TCEQ regulatory standpoint, but the direction was build it as big as we can within the regulatory bounds.
What kind of understanding have you received from folks with regard to how successful this might be for us with regard to receiving funding?
I'm sorry.
Do you have you been given any kind of indication from anybody there about our hopes for success with this funding? I mean, is anybody saying, yeah, this looks really good and we think that you're going to probably be able to get
I have not necessarily
significant
received
funding?
feedback from the EIC on any of that material. I will say that this did go to council. As you recall, the process for city projects is to go to the council and receive direction on whether we should go before EIC, and it was a unanimous decision in front of the council.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about with the water board.
Oh, they're pretty much, if they've got the money, they send it forward. Most of those projects are not denied. So it's a revolving fund. And so as the funds are coming in from payments from other entities that are doing similar projects, those funds are recalibrated. So it's an applicable project. We have no doubt that it will get funded.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but on the we're sort of doing these two asks simultaneously, but the EIC amount or even method is sort of contingent upon the water board result of whether they say yes or no. So if say they turned it down flat, we wouldn't be asking for EIC from $2 million cash. We'd probably be asking for debt financing like they were before, right?
Yes, sir. We'd probably have to come back and recalibrate.
It changes things is all I'm saying,
It
right?
would. And we could we would be working that in the funding agreement, those details.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
What kind of rate?
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, what rate of interest do they charge, and would that be a fixed rate, or would that be a floating rate, or how does that work?
It is a floating rate. Stuart, I think it's 1.3 below market. Is that right?
Yeah, 130
basis points.
below.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you guys
Below-
presented it, it was
below what?
actually presented as like 1.8%, but there was this enormous fee, the administrative fee tied to it, which put it more like 2.4 or something like that.
Right.
So that's what it was at the time.
Yes. Yeah, we do evaluate it. There are a number of features that are required, whether that's be Davis-Bacon or American Steel, a whole number of different things that could potentially change the bids and the cost of bids. But we factored that in. We've worked with our engineer. We've worked with our financial advisor, and they've kind of had a plug number, and it's still the metrics worked out between the two on the pros and cons of going after the Water Development Board funding.
What would the term be, like 20 years?
Yes, I believe it's a
I think they
30-year
go
loan,
up.
actually. It's a 30-year
30-year term?
yes,
Yes.
yeah. Which the lifespan of the infrastructure is more than 30 years, so.
On a more optimistic note, if they decided to fund more than 7.85, which is what we're anticipating they're going to do, then the requirement from EIC would be less.
Well, it's based off the pro forma of the overall financial ability of the water sewer fund to be able to complete this project as well as other projects. So again, it should be, even if they approve for the 9.85, the city is asking for the 2 million in funding.
Irrespective.
Yes, sir.
I think it's not irrespective of it, it's actually expected, because the true amount of dollars we're trying to expense from the two combined is the Legion lift station plus I always mess up the initials, the messed up water we got, right?
TTHM.
Yeah,
Yes.
that. So those two combined are getting us to the truly 12 million that they're trying to get
All right,
at.
thank you. That was
So
really
it's-
my question.
Yeah, we have a subsequent application that we'll be submitting here in the
Yeah.
next couple months
Okay.
for that project. It's with a little different pool of dollars, but it's the same basic concept. But again, that one is not EIC eligible.
Right, because you come to EIC because this can be funded through that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Should our funding agreement reflect that it might go toward other costs? Because I didn't read that in here.
Well, it won't go towards other costs. It will go towards specifically to the
The
Legion
Legion.
lift
And
station
then you would use
project.
that money that if they grant the full amount.
Well, the water sewer fund will be able to utilize other resources to accomplish other projects that otherwise would have
Got
to go
it.
to this one.
Money's fungible.
Yes.
This goes to Legion Lift Station.
Okay.
This will be
Right.
strictly for Legion lift station because it is eligible under EIC regulations.
Any other questions?
So the action that we would be looking for tonight, if it's the desire of the EIC, is to direct staff to begin drafting a funding agreement and set a public hearing date. If it's agreeable to the EIC, we'd like to go ahead and set that in May, if that's y'all's desire.
All right,
I'd so move.
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. One thing to mention, we do have this slated for executive session if we so choose. And if you'd rather move this to that, we certainly can, or we can continue on just a comment with the vote.
Could I just ask one more question?
Sure.
I'm just curious, I'm sure you've run all the numbers, how will this impact future use of EIC money? I mean, we have plenty of money going forward, even if we use the 2 million for other projects.
Yes, sir. We would work it into your 2019, fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2020 budgets. So again, you've got, as you may recall from your financial documents, there's a significant reserve balance there. But I don't know that we would necessarily have to go into the reserve. We'd have to look at that during the budget time. But we'll work it into those budgets.
Do we have anything pending or thinking about beyond this in the next 2 or 3 years, other than what's already been planned?
Right now, not from a public infrastructure or public project standpoint. No, sir. We don't have anything slated. Certainly, there's private projects that could come up, but not from a public standpoint.
Well, for example, there was talk about work on the Olympic pool, funds to go there. Would that impact the Olympic pool in the if they needed funds for that?
Right. I don't think so. We're going through the feasibility analysis right now. Obviously, as we're bringing that out to an RFQ process, I think that's going to take 6 to 9 months potentially on that. Right now, we're looking at a potential bond program that could be initiated for that. Certainly, it's something EIC, if directed, could contribute to, but that's very early on. And I think it would probably, the funding for that, if it was even desired by the EIC, would be out past the 2-year time span that we're proposing in regards to Legion.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion that was made, raise your right hand. I'd have to read that or remember it. Anyway, it is approved unanimously. All right. Item number 4C, which is the funding application from Collette Properties for $500,000 to assist with the site preparation and redevelopment of the northeast corner of Loop 534 and State Highway 16. EA?
So we have an application that has been received from Collette Properties. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Walt Koenig, who is representing KDC for this project.
Thanks, man.
Welcome, Walt.
Hi, Walt.
How y'all doing today? Yeah, as was said, the Economic Development Corporation has received a $500,000 request to assist in the preparation of redevelopment of the northeast corner of Loop 534 and State Highway 16. That is the Econo Lodge property, for those of you who know it. We have been in conversation with Colette. The $500,000 that they're seeking is roughly half of that is to support the demolition of that hotel. The balance is to improve the access of that property from a road standpoint, and also to defer some of the costs of some of the fees. This, from an EDC standpoint, is a relatively unprecedented deal in that it's a redevelopment deal. However, we do believe that given that it will take a property that is perhaps not highest and best use for that location, remove it and replace it with something else that is of better use, it's worth and worthy of high consideration. Colette, after the site is developed and renovated, will indeed use it to host a large regional retail establishment plus a fast food establishment. The application, as well as the backup documents from Colette, are part of your package. Again, we would appreciate the EIC's consideration of this deal. We do believe that, given that it's redevelopment, it is in consistency with the spirit of the comprehensive plan as we see it unfolding, though not approved yet. I believe that we're seeing clear indications from the community of a preference towards redevelopment versus greenfield development. And this site, being at the gateway of our city through one of the main entrances into our city, could be greatly improved through this action. I'm open to any questions.
Will we be given more information than we have here in our packet? I just have a letter.
Yeah, there's a lot of information. Due to the sensitive nature of this, it will be discussed elsewhere in executive session.
So in third paragraph, it talks about 380 and 4B funds. Is there a request for tax abatement as well?
No, there's not. That's actually their note to us. We have had discussions with them. There's not a tax abatement factor or feature of this request at this time. That's probably a misprint on their part.
But kind of to his point, are they anticipating coming to EIC to, I mean, this is the beginning, demolition and the entryway off of 534. Are they anticipating a different ask for something else at this property?
At this time, that's the only asset they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've lost it. The $10 million number that's in there in retail sales, is that a time frame of when they expect to generate that?
There's additional details and breakdowns for that number elsewhere. We did look at that and believe that the projections they have on both revenue and employment and other aspects that you'll see are reasonable given what they're looking at doing there.
Are there any questions?
Any other questions?
I would make a motion if I can, that we take it into executive session for.
Second.
Yeah.
We have a motion and a second to take this
Oh,
item
what's the number?
into the executive session.
Hold on.
Same one.
807 and
071.
087? Okay, so I'm making a motion that we take it in under 551071 and 087.
A second.
Motion and a
Okay.
second. All those in favor, raise your right hand.
Sorry.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Walt.
Thanks,
Thanks,
you.
Walt.
All right, at this time, that finishes our items on the agenda. We will need a motion to move into executive session.
I move.
There you go.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. We are moving into executive session. It is 4:40. Okay, I will call this meeting back into session out of executive session. No action was taken in executive session, but we did have quite a bit of discussion, and the two items that were on that in discussion in executive session were, let me find them again, items 3A and items 4C. I would accept the motion on either of those topics.
I'd like to make a motion that the funding application for Collette property, we direct staff to begin negotiations for creating a funding application and looking towards a setup of a public hearing for a funding application between Collette Properties and the city, or EIC, sorry.
Funding
Funding
agreement.
Agreement, right.
What did I
Not a-
say?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I said
Yeah.
funding application.
Okay.
Yeah, I meant funding
Just making
agreement,
sure.
my bad.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of that, raise your right hand. And that motion carries unanimously. And then the second was on item 3A, which was the Thompson Drive Partners LLC.
I'll go
Funding
ahead and make a
agreement.
motion if you want.
Okay,
I make a motion that we direct staff to finalize the changes that we discussed and to move forward with setting up a special meeting for Monday at 2, this coming Monday at 2, with the intent of reviewing those changes and possibly approving an agreement.
Second?
we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. And that motion is approved unanimously. All right, items, 7 items for future agendas. Anybody have anything you want put on a future agenda? Any announcements?
We have a defibrillator in there in the future.
I don't know if that needs to be on the agenda. And then motion to adjourn.
You gonna make that motion? I'll make a motion.
No.
Please adjourn.
Motion
Second.
to adjourn. All those in favor, raise your right hand. This meeting is concluded.